Most people are terrified of being alone. Not because solitude is painful, but because silence removes the performance. And without the noise of other people, you are finally left face to face with yourself. That is the part nobody admits. The world teaches you that constant connection is health. Constant attention is value. Constant social validation is proof that your life matters. So you keep surrounding yourself with voices, notifications, conversations, distractions. Not because they fulfill you. Because they prevent confrontation. But here is the uncomfortable truth. If you are alone right now, if your circle has become smaller, if you feel separated from the crowd, there is a real possibility that your life is not collapsing. It may be clarifying. Because every meaningful transformation begins with separation. The seed disappears underground before it becomes a tree. Iron enters fire before it becomes a blade. And you, before becoming someone dangerous in discipline, clear in thought, and impossible to manipulate, will almost always go through a season where the world becomes quieter. Most people panic during this phase. They think loneliness means failure. But sometimes loneliness is evidence that your mind is rejecting what no longer fits. You outgrow environments before you outgrow people. And people notice it before you do. The conversations feel thinner. The habits around you feel repetitive. The endless gossip, emotional dependency, fake ambition, performative lifestyles, it starts exhausting you instead of entertaining you. You stop laughing at things that used to distract you. You stop craving approval from people you secretly do not respect. And suddenly, without realizing it, you begin walking alone. Not because you hate people. Because your nervous system is beginning to value peace over stimulation. That changes everything. Most people are not afraid of isolation. They are afraid of identity without witnesses. They need constant reflection from others to know who they are. That is why they cannot sit in a room alone without reaching for a screen. Why silence feels heavy. Why weekends feel empty unless something is happening. Because they have built a self-image entirely dependent on external feedback. The crowd becomes their mirror. And a mirror that relies on other people will always distort. But solitude exposes reality. You begin noticing how much of your personality was adaptation. How many opinions were inherited. How many goals were borrowed. How many behaviors were performances designed to gain acceptance. This is why solitude feels uncomfortable at first. You are not just losing company. You are shedding identities. And the human brain hates uncertainty. Behavioral psychology proves this. The mind prefers familiar pain over unfamiliar freedom. Even destructive patterns feel safe when repeated long enough. That is why people stay in draining friendships, shallow relationships, meaningless routines. Predictability feels like survival. But the self-aware person understands something most never do: growth requires temporary social friction. Because evolution is disruptive. When your standards rise, your compatibility with your old environment decreases. That is not arrogance. That is structural reality. You cannot build a cathedral with scaffolding designed for a tent. And yet most people spend years shrinking themselves to maintain access to groups they have already mentally outgrown. Think about it. How many people sabotage their discipline to avoid making others uncomfortable? How many stay average because excellence threatens the dynamics around them? A man starts improving his body, his focus, his finances, his emotional control, and suddenly people accuse him of changing. Of course he changed. That was the entire point. The tragedy is not that people change. And this is where another uncomfortable truth appears. Some people only like the version of you they could control. The distracted version. The insecure version. The endlessly available version. But once you become focused, calm, selective, your presence changes. You stop explaining yourself constantly. You stop chasing inclusion. You stop negotiating your standards. And suddenly some people feel distance from you even when you say nothing. Because your energy no longer seeks validation. That threatens people who survive through emotional dependency. So they call you cold, arrogant, detached. But detachment is not cruelty. Sometimes it is recovery. A starving mind cannot become powerful while constantly feeding everyone else first. And here is the paradox nobody talks about. The more comfortable you become alone, the healthier your future relationships become. Because now connection becomes choice instead of survival. You stop clinging. You stop tolerating disrespect out of fear of abandonment. You stop needing constant reassurance. You finally meet people from stability instead of emptiness. That changes the entire structure of your relationships. Most people connect through wounds. The self-aware connect through clarity. Completely different outcome. One creates dependency. The other creates alignment. But to reach that point, you must survive the transition period. And that period feels brutal. Because there comes a stage where your old life no longer fits, but your new life has not fully formed yet. This is the test. Can you continue building without immediate validation? Can you trust the process before evidence appears? Most cannot. They need visible confirmation every step of the way. But real transformation is architectural. The deepest changes happen underground first. Roots before branches. Identity before results. And if you can endure this invisible phase, something extraordinary begins happening. Your mind becomes less emotional and more intention. The tragedy is that most people apologize for it. So they dilute themselves. They rejoin the noise. They abandon solitude before it finishes its work. And this is where most transformations die. Because solitude is not just isolation. It is neurological recalibration. When you step away from constant social input, your mind begins recovering its own signal. Your attention stabilizes. Your thinking deepens. You stop reacting and start observing. For the first time in years, you can hear your own judgment without interference. That is powerful. But dangerous too. Because now excuses become visible. You begin realizing how much time was wasted seeking emotional permission. How many decisions were delayed because you feared being misunderstood. How much energy disappeared maintaining appearances. Solitude turns your life into a mirror with no blur filter. And many people cannot survive that honesty. So they escape back into distraction. Endless scrolling. Pointless conversations. Artificial intimacy. Anything to avoid the terrifying clarity of self-awareness. But the disciplined person learns to endure the silence long enough for it to transform them. There is a reason ancient philosophers walked alone. A reason monks isolated themselves. A reason elite performers protect their attention with almost ruthless intensity. Human beings absorb environments psychologically, emotionally, behaviorally. You become porous to repetition. Spend enough time around mediocrity and your nervous system normalizes it. Spend enough time around chaos and your mind begins expecting instability. People think influence is persuasion. It is exposure. The environment shapes the organism. Always. That means solitude is not emptiness. It is defensive architecture. A controlled environment where your mind can rebuild without contamination.